take a few minutes and visit our website at the battleofgettysburgpodcast.com to shop, buy some new merch, check in on our upcoming events, and of course, buy Civil War books from one of your favorite podcasters.
Hi, everyone. Jim Hessler, Battle of Gettysburg podcast. I'm coming to you on YouTube and joined again today by my co-host, Jody. Jody, how are you today?
I'm great. It's the first day of fall here, and we're heading to Maryland. Everybody should be
Yeah,
cheering right now, right? They should be like, "Ah, we're heading to Maryland to interview some of our very good friends."
we have good friends. Oh, yes, we
We
do.
do. We have a few.
Yeah, I did think you'd be excited by this. We do have not one, but two guests coming to us from Maryland today. And you're in Maryland. Of course, I'm coming to everybody from the center of the Civil War universe, world headquarters in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. But yes, this is a special Maryland edition of the Battle of Gettysburg podcast.
Right.
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 And
Now,
you do have these, we haven't introduced this yet, but I'm impressed with your budget that you could afford both of us.
yeah, this is high tech stuff we've got going here. You can see my
Yeah.
my studio, and it actually brings up a comment that I wanted to make because yes, all joking aside, Jody, are we not blessed to have so many friends in the Civil War community?
We
But
really
this
are.
but this is the first appearance from the National Museum of Civil War Medicine in beautiful Frederick, Maryland. Our good friends, Director of Interpretation, Dana Schoaf, and Director of Marketing and Communications, Melissa Wynn. Dana, Melissa, welcome to the Battle of Gettysburg podcast.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much for having us
Yeah.
on. Yeah, I really love your podcast and I appreciate being asked. It's nice for us to feel like we have friends too that,
Yeah.
are interested in what we have going on down here. So thank you. And I forgot it was the first day of fall. That's always nice. I love fall, and it's just too short because it seems to
Yeah.
go real fast. But it's kind of overcast and not real pretty down here today. But it's still nice to know it's fall.
Yeah,
Yeah.
those crisp and cool 90-degree September days, right? Right out on the
No,
battlefield.
Yeah.
no, that's
Now
what's
keep
going
it
on. Yeah.
Keep in mind, let's not timestamp this too much as the first day of fall, because by the time I get around to editing this and putting it out, it'll
Oh,
probably be like Christmas or something.
oh.
But
No.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Yeah. Ho, ho, ho.
Yeah.
Melissa, you're so festive. Yes, exactly.
Uh-huh.
All right, guys. So you're right, though. We are recording this in fall. The Battle of Antietam and the Maryland campaign is in the air.
Mhm.
But this is the Battle of Gettysburg podcast, and we generally try to, for the most part, keep in the Gettysburg swim lane. Before though we get into Gettysburg, obviously a lot of people watching are going to know both of you guys, but you want to tell us just a little bit about the museum, mission, what you guys are doing, things of that nature?
Sure. I mean, the National Museum of Civil War Medicine, of course, our mission really is to educate the public about Civil War medicine, but really what the innovations that come out of Civil War medicine and how they still impact us today. There's a lot of innovation that happens at the time, really out of necessity that still impacts battlefield medicine today, triage. Those are things that mass casualty events, those are still things that we see the benefit of the Civil War today. So we definitely educate about that as well. The museum's been around for it's kind of started up in 1996 based on our founder's collection. He was a dentist and he collected medical items from the Civil War, dentistry items and medical items, and eventually wanted to make a museum out of it.
And
Gettysburg,
that was
maybe, yes, Gordon Dahman,
Gorman,
yes,
yeah.
yes. Gordon Dahman and his wife Karen Dahman as well. She was also instrumental in that as well. So They start founded the museum. I was going to say Gettysburg may be the epicenter of the Civil War, but Frederick is the epicenter of Civil War medicine. So they decided to put the museum in Frederick, Maryland. It was definitely a key location for many battles during the Civil War. And it opened its doors in the late 90s. And then, really, in this location that we're at now on Patrick Street in 2000. And we've been there, we've been here ever since. So we're open every
It opened here, as Melissa said, it opened in 2000 at this location. We're in what's called the Carty building, Carty, and part of it at least was here during the war. It's been changed and added on to, but we're right downtown at 48 East Patrick Street, and we have three floors, two of which are devoted to exhibits, and the third floor is our, lavish offices. So our visitation has been doing really well. Our visitation, particularly this year, has been really robust. So it's been good.
Good, good. I'm glad to hear
yeah.
that. And
Now you have two other sites, right?
Yes, we administer the Clara Barton Missing Soldiers Office in Washington, D.C. as well. And speaking of Antietam, we also uh, open the Pry House Field Hospital Museum. The house itself right now is closed for some work, but we interpret in the barn. We have two actual reproduction ambulances from the
Mhm.
Civil War in the barn. So we do that throughout October. It's usually April through October. We open that site as well. And again, the Clara Barton Missing Soldiers Office down in Washington, D.C. is a really cool site. It's really neat. It's actually where Clara Barton lived during the Civil War, where she kind of ran her humanitarian efforts out of there as well. And then in the last part of the war and afterwards, ran the Missing Soldiers Office, where she was able to help locate more than 22,000 missing soldiers.
And that interesting thing, we don't actually own this building. The city of Frederick leases it to us for $1 a year. But this is more or less our place. The Clara Barton is still owned by the General Accounting Office. So we
Food
have an
Services
agreement with
Administration.
them. We operate it. And then, of course, the Pry Barn is National Park Service property. And we used to operate the house and the barn, but the house is undergoing some renovations right now. So we've just had the barn open on Saturdays through this season, which was the First Division's Second Corps Field Hospital at Antietam. So, yeah.
last but not least, haven't I seen you advertising? Do you do tours of Frederick as well, or is something you're affiliated with?
We have a number of tours that involved with. We have a walking tour of Frederick because Frederick was the general hospital location for the Maryland campaign and the Battle of Antietam. 27 buildings in Frederick were converted to hospitals, in addition to some tent hospitals that were set up as well. A lot of those still survive, and so you can take a walking tour with a docent and see those structures and hear the stories. We also offer tours of Shepherdstown and the Confederate hospitals after Antietam. And we are involved with a bus tour company here in Frederick that offers double-decker bus tours of Civil War sites in Frederick, and we provide the docents and a lot of interpretation for that. Yeah.
And
Right.
outside of DC, in the Clara Barton Missing Soldiers Office Museum, we also have a walking tour
Yeah.
of Washington, D.C. through Clara Barton's eyes,
Mhm.
mostly kind of Civil War sites hidden in plain sight today.
Yeah.
Great, great. Well, best of luck, and I know continued success to both of you on that.
Yeah.
So what do you think, Jody? Are we ready to seg into some Gettysburg content?
Absolutely. We're always ready to go to
Okay.
Gettysburg.
Well, I mean, a
I
nice
love
trans.
Gettysburg. Even if we are in Maryland, I love Gettysburg.
I
So
love Gettysburg too.
I know, and that's one of the things I love about you guys. I don't see you saying, "Oh, too much Gettysburg. I'm sick of Gettysburg." You embrace that elephant.
listen, I will say this. Gettysburg never fails to fascinate. it's not just because of this giant battle, but also the stories with the monuments, the veteran reunion, the
Yeah.
civilian populace. Every time I go to Gettysburg, I learn something new or see something new. And
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
And, yeah, it's as close to a Civil War mecca as we have because you can go there, have lunch, go to a relic store, spend money, buy a book, and then see amazing actual sites where history occurred. Okay.
Hire
So
a licensed battlefield guide, dare I
Yeah,
say?
hire a licensed,
absolutely.
excellent licensed guy like yourself. I love Gettysburg.
But nah, it's
I'm
Yeah, I
great.
love
not
it.
gonna be afraid of it.
I
That's
think there's been a lot of times where we've run into each other on occasion.
Yeah.
mm,
If anyone doesn't like Gettysburg, come at me, bro.
that's right. That's right.
Oh,
Hey,
sorry.
I have a running joke that Dana goes over to Culp's Hill more than I do. So yeah, think that might be right. All right, but let's talk medicine and field hospitals and
Okay.
things of that nature. First of all, what got me thinking, hey, we should have Dana and Melissa on for a medical themed episode. Camp Letterman has obviously been in our news recently and not for good reasons. It
Yeah,
is officially and unequivocally been developed over. And when you think of Gettysburg medicine, Letterman is a name that often comes to mind.
Right.
Yeah, I
yep.
think Dana, we kind of talked about this a little bit ahead of time. Did you want to maybe start with some comparisons of the medical departments of the Army of the Potomac and maybe compare and contrast, as they used to say,
Yeah.
Army in Northern Virginia?
What I'm gonna do is very briefly just take you from the beginning of the war to get you to Gettysburg. Okay, and it's not gonna take too long. So but more or less, when the war begins, and I say this a lot, neither side is prepared for the awful number of casualties,
Hmm.
including the North with its resources. And the North has an outdated, sort of an older gentleman named Clement Finley as the Surgeon General. And he's described as an ossified fool, a blockhead, is too old to handle the job, and he's 64. And I'm a little touchy about that because that's right where I'm sitting. And I'm like, wow. So, but Finley will get forced out in large part because the Sanitary Commission, the civilian aid organization, forms after Manassas, or right actually before Manassas, but it really gets empowered after First Manassas or Bull Run because of the fact there are wounded men laying on the field for up to a week. They're like, we have to do better. So Finley's out and William Hammond is put in place. Hammond is a fairly young guy. Um, and Hammond is pre-war friends with Jonathan Letterman, okay, the who will become the medical director of the Army of the Potomac in Melissa, it's
June of 1862.
June of 62. Hammond appoints Letterman as the medical director. And in part, it's going to work really well because Letterman had gone to Jefferson Medical College in Philadelphia, which was founded by George McClellan's father, George McClellan Sr. And he took classes from his dad. So McClellan, and I can't go into all the details, McClellan, Letterman, and Hammond had known each other and were comfortable working together. And McClellan really deserves a bit more credit because of all the commanding officers of the Army of the Potomac, I think he's the most medically attuned, right? And he basically gives Letterman carte blanche to implement sanitation reforms and also establish a hospital system with an ambulance system with General Orders number 147, which is in August of 1862. And that formally establishes an ambulance corps in the Army of the Potomac. Its shakedown cruise is Antietam. The Army's not fully equipped with ambulances at that point, the Army of the Potomac, but they use them to well enough effect that they're like, we're going to keep developing this. And also, right after Antietam, Letterman will codify this three-stage system, which consists of triage, as we would call it, or first aid as close to the front lines as possible, Then the establishment of field hospitals where men are then taken by ambulance, ideally. Once they are recovered there, they are sent to general hospitals to finish their recuperation. General hospitals, general just means it's not limited to a division or a brigade. Anybody could get sent there. And these are more permanent structures or tents where these guys can convalesce for a much longer period of time until they either return to duty or are sent home. Yeah. So that is the process that gets this three-stage system in place by Gettysburg. They started out at Antietam, and it works, but it's rusty. It works, and then Fredericksburg, Letterman considers a success because it works pretty well at Fredericksburg. It's well enough established, and then Chancellorsville is sort of a setback because McClellan's long gone, and the commanders of the various armies have a lot of input on this stuff. And so Hooker, Letterman's ideal is that three ambulances accompany each regiment. Hooker says no, only two ambulances per division will accompany the army on the flank march from, up the Rappahannock. And he also does not allow any of those ambulances to cross the river.
Okay.
And so there's some problems at Chancellorsville, and not to mention because the Confederates hold the field. But I think at Gettysburg, even though there's still some issues, I think that the three-stage system and everything that Letterman wants to accomplish works better at Gettysburg than it does anywhere else.
Okay.
And that's because these guys are practiced by this point. They know what's going on. They've done it before. And Letterman, and this is true for Antietam as well, the Sharpsburg area and the Gettysburg area are part of the same sort of social, cultural, Germanic English background, which means big barns. Like you got big barns all over the place. You have nice big open fields it's fairly easy to get ambulances in and out of, and you have good infrastructure systems. It doesn't work nearly as well as I said in the wilderness area with Chancellorsville and in 64, wilderness Spotsylvania, all the way down to Petersburg. It's much more challenging because they don't have some of this built environment that actually helps them make this succeed. Yeah.
Interesting. So you brought a question on that. You talked about the transition from McClellan to Hooker. Obviously, George Meade only in command of the Army of the Potomac for a
Right.
couple of days, right? So does Meade have time to get involved in this at all? Does You said it worked well for Letterman at
Yeah.
Gettysburg, but I mean, is that with the Hooker system in place? Huh, Hooker system, but or is it a
Jeez.
does he kind of let Letterman go back and do what he wants to do? How's that all play out?
What's kind of interesting is that Letterman is really challenged by this change of command constantly, which is even more impressive that he's able to institute so many of these, regulations and the organization of not just, medical care, the ambulance corps, but nutrition, these things to improve the health care of these
Yeah,
troops. By the time of Gettysburg, he's almost not even caring about the ambulance corps as much because it's already a well-run system. But yeah, he is super challenged by the fact that he has it in place under McClellan. He knows how it works, and then he has to change and go under, Burnside, then Hooker, then Meade, and each commander has a different philosophy, so to say, about how important is the medical department. What are we putting our priority at? And Letterman is highly challenged by that, even
Mhm.
including Meade. Meade really does have some, before the battle begins, obviously there's still, there's no way to know exactly where it's going to start and where it's going to happen. They're scouting, they're out on the, and Letterman has to try to implement this organization without knowing exactly where it has to be. And Meade actually is saying, let's make sure we get the military, stuff there first. The supplies for that are much more important than the supplies for the medical department. So he is actually hampered by that, that regulation from Meade.
Yeah, and Letterman, who writes very lengthy, very detailed reports.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, he starts off his Gettysburg report complaining about Hooker, because he actually says, and I'm paraphrasing, I kind of had this all figured out in the fall of 1862, and since then I've had to deal with all these issues of supply. Now, Burnside, as far as I can tell, being a McClellan acolyte, he kind of leaves the medical stuff alone. Hooker's the one that kind of takes it a step back, and Meade doesn't really have a chance. Come on, he's got a lot on his mind to change it before Gettysburg. And Letterman complains about how his supplies have been cut down, and he's been ordered to leave wagons of supplies and ambulances behind. Hooker Hooker had that light division, which a lot of people, and I'm not that aware of it myself, but he was experimenting with ways to make the armies move more rapidly
Yeah. Yeah.
and carry all their supplies on them. And I think his mindset is still in the army to like move as quickly as we can. And there's one of the first things they cut are the medical conveyances. And then Letterman also complains because Meade makes him park his surplus baggage near Westminster. And Letterman will take his own extraordinary step and have a surgeon named Brinton, who's a medical purveyor who gets supplies. He will have him gather supplies and have them waiting in Frederick that Letterman will snag on the way up. And Letterman says, I had him do that. I didn't even know we were going to be going through Frederick. It was just a guess.
Hmm.
But it worked out in his favor because he did
Yeah.
get that. So, you know, and Melissa can speak to this a little too. The 12th Corps surgeon in chief ignores Hooker and Meade, and he keeps his full complement. And Letterman
Yeah.
praises him in his report and says, see, it worked. All capital operations in the 12th Corps were done within 24 hours of a guy getting hit. And that means amputations. Capital operations mean amputations, basically. And we couldn't get to that in the other corps because we didn't have enough supplies, and we got them there quickly, but there was a lag. And he said, when you cut them out, you cut the medical supplies out of the army trains, and then you depend on the railroads to bring those to you when you need them. What happened here? The railroads were cut again, just as they were at Antietam. The railroad bridge was cut
Mhm.
over the Monocacy south of Frederick, and I couldn't get stuff when I needed it. So he's complaining about that, and he spends a good deal of his Gettysburg report complaining about why his plan works, and keeps getting messed with. Yeah.
Right. Well, also it really demonstrates how Letterman has a better relationship with the Sanitary Commission and the Christian Commission, these civilian organizations, than his predecessors did, and even maybe that Stanton wants, So he works with them pretty well, and here the rest of the corps they need those supplies because like the 12th Corps really does benefit from having its full amount of supplies with them, and the other ones do not. So the
Mhm.
Sanitary Commission really plays a big role here in filling the gap for supplies in at
So
Gettysburg.
for our people who aren't really aware of the medical needs and what that relates to, you mentioned a couple minutes ago that like the 12th Corps, most of their, I guess, significant wounds were cared for within 24 hours, right? So what
Yeah.
does that mean for the soldier? Does that mean you have a better chance of surviving, keeping your limb? Like, what does that mean?
They
Not
do.
everybody might know that.
Well, the sooner an amputation was done after a wound was incurred,
Hmm.
I don't know the percentage, but the higher the percentage of survival was.
Okay.
And so, getting these mangled limbs off of people does help cut down the infection rate. And
Yeah, the real
sometimes
threat from those wounds is infection.
it's
Okay.
infection. So, you cut a damaged limb off, say it's 48 hours later, that infection may have already moved from the injury itself into your bloodstream, right?
Hmm.
So, it's still a problem. So yeah, the sooner they can get to these guys, the better. And that's why Letterman was adamant about these aid stations to try to perform first aid as quickly as possible and make decisions about who's going to make it, who's going to have to get, more serious surgery and et cetera. And one of the things, Gettysburg speaking specifically, is that I believe, these aid stations are not often documented. Where did they set up, right? The surgeons. So the way it's structured, let me just say this. Each regiment has at least two surgeons. They're supposed to have at least two surgeons, each regiment. A full surgeon, who is a major, and then an assistant surgeon who is most often a captain, sometimes a lieutenant. The way the Letterman sets it up, the full surgeon will be assigned to the division hospital, right? That's where they're assigned to get that ready as the battle's progressing and set up treatment. The assistant surgeons stay with the regiments at the front line, and their job is more or less to oversee aid stations and their establishment and to communicate with the full surgeon what's going on and direct men back to the field hospital. And so, what's interesting for a number of reasons at Gettysburg, we know where some of these aid stations were, at least three that I'm aware of. And we don't really know that for a lot of these other battlefields where they were actually located. And it's partially because Gettysburg was sort of such this veteran mecca, you know what I mean? And the
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
veterans come back and they are putting up monuments and they're like, well, I remember this. And some of them actually talk about their aid stations as well. And we can talk about those if you'd like. So,
Yeah, why don't we do that? Dana, you and I had a personal experience in one of them this past winter. But as you said, there's only a couple that we know of that are identified. One in particular with a monument and plaque. You want to just talk about that a little bit? But before, and then I want to make sure after we do that, that we don't neglect the Army of Northern Virginia.
no,
So
you're right.
somebody just make
Absolutely.
sure we come back to them too.
Yeah. Well, one of the things it's like most of the innovation and progress is on the northern side because the Confederacy is just hampered by lack of, throughout. But they do extraordinary things with what they have on hand. So, but the 32nd Massachusetts aid station is the most famous, I think, really the most famous aid station of the Civil War because it's monumented. They're
Yeah.
basically, oh, you're gonna have to help me. It's just off the Wheatfield Road. There's a giant boulder. What monument is it behind? Do you remember?
Well, it's across from the Irish Brigade
Hmm.
monument, right?
Right across the
Right.
road from the Irish Brigade is this boulder with a bronze plaque on it that was put up by the survivors of the 32nd Massachusetts. And their regimental monument is the shelter half that's kind of back across the road.
Right.
So they're up in that rocky hill off the Wheatfield area, Stony Hill. And um, Zabdiel Boylston Adams was the assistant surgeon of the 32nd Massachusetts. And he establishes this aid station in this pile of boulders. And they're, bringing their guys in there, and Confederates are going in there as well. And he works, just feverishly to try to stem bleeding, get these guys stabilized, and they remember him and put this monument up. And what's really cool about it for our purposes is, yeah, he's close to the front lines here.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
bullets, there's bullets hitting those boulders. He's right there, and so that's he's sort of the epitome of what Letterman had in mind when it comes to these aid stations. And Adams, to me, he's kind of legendary. He works so hard for like 2 days and 3 nights, I think it is, without a break, that he loses his vision. He goes
Uh-huh.
temporarily blind. And I'm
Uh-huh.
sure Black poor or sketchy nutrition, you know what I mean? Stress, overexertion, all that stuff um, comes into play here. But he will go temporarily blind. And because of that, he resigns his medical commission because he doesn't want this to happen to him again if he's working on wounded soldiers. And then later on, he will enlist in the 56th Massachusetts Infantry as a company officer. And he's wounded at the Wilderness and captured. He's shot in the leg. And he's taken to a Confederate hospital, and his wound starts to get gangrenous. And so he asks for carbolic acid. And carbolic acid was a very caustic liquid, but they had discovered, both Union and Confederate surgeons, that if you dumped it, if you dropped or you injected carbolic acid into gangrenous tissue, it killed the gangrene. They don't know why, but it kills the gangrene. And so there was another compound called bromine, which they also discovered the Federals did later on, which kills gangrene as well. And just as a quick aside, gangrene is almost wiped out by the end of the Civil War, which most people don't realize. You hear gangrene. They figured
Yeah.
it out. They figured it out. They didn't know why, but the Confederates had a harder time getting bromine, so they did get carbolic acid. So that's what Adams actually asked the Confederates to bring him some, and they do, and he pours it on his own wound. And anybody that described this process talks about the snapping, the burning, the popping, the smoke, and the smell of this, because it's also killing good tissue.
Yeah.
But he does this, and it will cure his wound. They exchange him because they're still getting rid of the wounded in exchanges. They don't want the wounded. He goes back. He's not done. He heals up. He'll serve around Petersburg and gets a commendation, I think, for serving at Petersburg. And then after the war in 1909, he falls over a dam in Massachusetts and is drowns.
Damn. Damn.
Damn, literally.
But I'm sorry, that's a little far afield, but that goes
No.
back to this aid station
Yeah.
at the wheat field. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just
No, I wanted to add, so last winter, Dana hired my services to give a tour to family and friends. And of course, this was one of the stories we did together. 32nd Massachusetts. And about a week later, I had a group come out and I did the story again. And the group included a number of young nurses. And
Ah,
one of them, when I talked to the story about the stress and everything causing Adams to go blind, temporarily have sight issues. One of the nurses in the group piped up and said, Jim, you can't go blind from that. So, challenge has been laid down here.
yeah.
I immediately came home and consulted with the Battle of Gettysburg
right,
podcast medical department, which
right.
included a phone call to the National Museum of Civil War Medicine in Frederick. And yes, you can. So
Interestingly, I answered the phone that day.
yeah,
Gettysburg Podcast Medical Department. I
exactly.
don't know why,
See,
So
but
it's
I
good
knew,
to have friends.
yeah, I
if
knew
that
to
young
answer it that
lady,
way.
if that young lady is watching, I'm waiting for her to come back
Yeah.
next year.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just say to that young lady, look, we know there's other things you could go blind for.
Well, that was kind of exactly the yeah, but all
Yeah,
right.
sorry. This is a family podcast.
So maybe we want to revoke that young lady's nursing license. Maybe
Yeah,
that's
I don't
the
want to go to that hospital.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
All right. How about other aid stations?
one of my favorite is the Hampton's Battery Rock. And Hampton was Robert Hampton was the battery commander. It's a Pennsylvania light artillery. It's a what is it?
F.
C?
Battery
F.
F.
Yeah.
Battery. Thing. So, yeah, Hampton is killed at Chancellorsville, but consolidated with another battery because both these Pennsylvania batteries are banged up after Chancellorsville. But they have this position they hold kind of right across from the Pennsylvania Memorial, is where the battery ends up, and it will take part in helping to repulse Pickett's charge, which somebody wrote a book about. But so in the battery history, there's a photograph, a full page photograph of uh, two, which we would imagine are veterans of the battery, sitting on this rock. And the caption reads something on the order, "Rock behind which our wounded were sheltered at Gettysburg."
Hmm.
And then two fellows from Western Pennsylvania, where a lot of the battery was raised, uh, were looking at that photo, and they went out. This has been a while now, and discovered the location because you can match it up, kind of like all of Frazanito. Look at match the boulder, and they identified Hampton's Battery Rock, which still exists. That when they found it, it was overgrown and you couldn't see it.
Yeah.
And then Kathy George Harrison, but she's like, yes, I agree, you have found it. And so the park started cutting around it. They don't cut around it anymore, I don't think. You can kind of go down and still see it, but you used to be able to walk down right to the rock and walk around it. But
Hmm.
you can walk to where you can look across the high grass and see it. And it's behind the Pennsylvania Monument. Um, and the coolest thing is, I have a meager collection of original Civil War stuff, but it's the same photo that's in the Battery history. It's like an albumen print, which means it's about the size of a piece of notebook paper. That's what an albumen picture is. If you're familiar with a carte de visite, it's the same format. It's a paper image, only bigger. And so it's a photo of those. It's the same photo, the two veterans. And on the back is an advertisement for an elevator company in Pittsburgh. So I think this might have been handed out at a reunion or something.
Yeah, cool.
And then someone has written on there, um, um, I'm assuming again a veteran. It's you got that script look to it. Rock behind which our wounded were kept near the farm where General Barksdale died.
Right.
And that what's it's escaping me again. The farm where Barksdale dies.
Hummel.
Hummel,
Yeah.
which is just
Out of it, yeah.
Yeah.
a bit north of this rock.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And I will point out too, for any prospective battlefield guide candidates out there, and there seems to be a lot of them these days, but the Hampton Rock is on the 140 places every battlefield guide should know. So
Yes.
go find
Mhm.
that one.
Yeah, I think it's so cool. And then behind it, you see the Patterson farm in this photograph,
Oh, cool.
which
Yeah.
looks different than it does now because it must have had an addition on it at some point, because this photo of the veterans is post-battle, obviously. But the point is, again, this I am 100% sure, and you've seen things like this, Jody and Jim both with veterans. This is some kind of veteran-related ephemera here,
Yeah.
and they've got their aid station on it.
Hmm.
They're
Yeah.
like, this is an aid station where our wounded receive some of their initial care.
Yeah.
So I just, so there's two aid stations that you can find at Gettysburg. And I don't know if I want to keep talking. I feel like I'm doing all the talking, but
Well, I was going to just kind of say something too. That I think that's what's kind of neat about some of this stuff, and this is in general at all, is how some of these things get passed down.
Mhm.
Photos, of course, being a super big part of it. I mean, if you think about Camp Letterman, I think that's one of the reasons it's still in our consciousness, and even though it's being paved over as we speak, is the photographs of it. There's these real neat glimpse into what was there. And you see people there, you see wounded soldiers there, you see the beds, you see the tents, how it was set up. So it still feels like it was there. And, something like that with the aid stations too. Does anybody tell us about it, really?
Yeah.
It's how the stories get passed down. And we know where some of these things are. And there's so many that we don't because nobody documented it in some way, either writing it
Mhm.
down or photographing it.
And you make a good point because for veterans, I know like the battle is 3 days, and that's what we all tend to focus on. But for them, especially the ones who are wounded, that battle is going to last days, weeks, months, sometimes even years just to get better. So, of course, as veterans coming back, those aid stations are going to be really important.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, and Camp Letterman's there till November 20th. So
Right.
that's just even, a few months just to get out of Gettysburg.
Yeah.
So they're taking
Mhm.
that with
Some
them,
of us
which
stay in Gettysburg forever.
that's
Right.
It
true.
took them till November.
I'm
Everyone's
lucky
moving to
Yeah.
Gettysburg and everyone's taking the guide test.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And then
I'm
everyone is sick of Gettysburg and they're but
No,
Yeah.
I'm
that's
not.
another.
Oh
No,
no.
We're telling you these
President
rich
Present
stories,
Company
people.
accepted. Present
You
Company
know,
accepted.
these are rich stories. Yeah.
That's
You
Yeah.
know,
great because you're answering
yeah.
the what next, like what happened next.
Yeah.
And
And
usually we just cut it off at the third.
well, and I want to just echo that point, Jody, because a lot of times on
Yeah.
tours, and I'm sure you've all encountered this, but I get this as a guide. A lot of times on tours, I will get the how many people were killed at Gettysburg,
Yeah.
and and first of all, they're always depending on the group. I may say 7,500. I may say around 10,000. Depending on how
Yeah.
you round the number. But the group is almost always inevitably disappointed that the number of killed is quote unquote so low. But kind of like what you said, Jody, I said, well, wait a minute, wait a minute. Think about the 30,000 wounded and think about that young man who has had his arm
Yeah.
amputated, the
Hmm.
farmer who's had his leg amputated and is now 22 years old and is going to have to live the rest of his life without that. And it's a cost of the battle, it's an aspect of the battle, then people will say, oh yeah, I didn't think of that because we just want big blood and gut numbers and we want to hear 51,000 killed, and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I mean, really, if you think about it, these men never left this war,
Hmm.
it came with them, it came home. And, one of the things that we talk about at the museum, and we're going to try hopefully to do even more so, we're actually about to undergo a redesign of some of the galleries, well, all the galleries, but is PTSD. It really wasn't known at that time to be PTSD, but this is something that they dealt with, um, you know, for sure, and in many different ways.
Yeah.
And, we really try to talk about that a lot at the museum.
Yeah, and
Melancholy.
I'd be really remiss if I didn't mention one of our mannequin dioramas is the Adams aid station.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
because we talk about the three-stage system and it's probably the best documented aid station there is. So, yeah.
And the nurse isn't on the other side yelling at me for telling the going blind story. Could you add that to
No,
the exhibit?
She's
no.
definitely
You
not.
can now.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're watching this, nurse.
Yeah.
You made a lasting impression on Jim
Yeah.
Hessler.
Yeah, she did. Oh, they all make lasting impressions.
Well, we're
Okay.
talking. Okay, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say going back because again I don't want anyone to think we neglected the Army of Northern Virginia
Yeah.
and like you said earlier, Dana, kind of the what they don't have is as fascinating or interesting as what the other side might have. But I just want to compare with what's going on in Lee's army.
Well, Lafayette Guild is going to be Lee's medical director, Letterman's counterpart for basically the entire war. And this is interesting for a couple reasons. Barbara Franco, who just put out a book on Gettysburg surgeons, which I haven't had a chance to read yet, unfortunately, but it looks fascinating. I had a brief discussion with her about some of these things, and she was saying that she was she was surprised to learn the turnover in Union surgeons that continues throughout the war because the medical schools are still operating in the North and these guys serve and then they go out and they're replaced, right? Doesn't really happen in the Confederacy because the medical schools shut down because of supply issues and whatnot. And so, you know, Letterman is not going to serve out the whole war as a medical director. He replaces a guy named Charles Tripler. Then he's gone by January 64 and he'll be replaced. And so that's sort of a larger, example of this rotation through surgeons. But Lafayette Guild serves the entire war for Lee. From Lee takes command basically to Appomattox. He graduates also from Jefferson Medical School. Melissa pointed this out to me just yesterday. He's a year older than Letterman, so they
Yeah,
probably knew each other.
before him. Yep.
They probably knew each other. And he was known as an army surgeon before the war for his work with yellow fever and containing yellow fever outbreaks. And he's highly respected because of that. Letterman, interestingly enough, is sort of a no-name before the war in many respects. He didn't write a book. He had served sort of inconsequentially on various military posts. You know what I mean? Letterman gets where he's going almost because he knows Hammond, the Surgeon General, and and he knows McClellan. He's a familiar, so patronage helps him, but he does good with it when he gets there.
Yeah.
But Guild suffers the whole war from lack of supplies. The ambulance issue is a good example of that. The same complaints after First Manassas are brought about by, Southern civilians. We got to get the wounded off the battlefields more quickly. And so there's this Richmond Ambulance Committee that's formed, which is sort of a civilian oversight agency to try to help get ambulances built. And it also sounds like a folk rock band. The Richmond Ambulance Committee coming in, you know what I mean? Anyway, so
Coming next week to the museum.
yeah, I know. I watched A Mighty Wind too many times. Sorry. But anyways, so they basically try to copy Union ambulances, but they can never, like in one year, I think they maxed out at 200 ambulances they were able to get produced. And for example, Captain Thomas Livermore, looking at a note here, 18th New Hampshire, he's the head of the Second Corps ambulance train. That train alone has 120 ambulances in it at Gettysburg, 40 per division. And so, compare, there's 100, more than 100 in one division or one corps. And, the Confederates were producing 200. And so at Gettysburg, um, Guild is like, when they realize they're going to have to retreat, he sends orders to his medical directors: scour, grab, take whatever wagons you can find. We don't have enough ambulances to haul these guys back. Take the worst wounded, and there's what, 7,000 to 8,000 of those guys.
Yeah.
Consolidate them in locations so that when the Federals take over the field, they can find them easily. And and then his report compared to Letterman's is much more terse. And at the end of Letterman's report, he gets a little almost congratulatory about how well we did. How well the medical department did, even though the high command wasn't following everything I wanted. Guild's, there's one line: the sufferings of the wounded were distressing. Indeed, the healthiest and most robust suffered extremely in crossing the river. He's talking about crossing the Potomac. Guild's got to get those guys out of there over South Mountain, across the Potomac River, and back into Virginia. And his report is full. Several times he'll make comments like that: the extreme suffering, the ghastly suffering of our wounded, trying to get them out of there and across. And he basically is like, thank God Meade didn't attack at Williamsport, because initially I didn't know how to get these guys across. And then when he gets back in Virginia, he's got to pick up another 4,000 wounded guys at Winchester. It's bad. And they get hammered at the passes, Monterey Pass, and what is Jack's Mountain a different, but the wagon trains get beat up there, and he's like, Gill's like, they destroyed a bunch of stuff. They kept the prisoners, they kept the officers prisoner, and they paroled the wounded men, but they didn't leave anything for us to help the wounded guys. We just had fewer wagons to haul them at that point because so many were destroyed. So he's got, he says, this is, he calls it the Gettysburg is the most vicious and sanguinary battle to take place on this continent.
Yeah.
And he said, I was hampered because I had no one to help escort us except elements of our broken down and inefficient cavalry. So, and when he gets back in Virginia, he's like, I didn't want to leave anyone at Culpeper because the Federals can easily raid Culpeper. So we had to get him further to Stanton, or I had to figure out how to get him back around to Richmond and Chimborazo. We don't have a lot of records for the Confederate Medical Department because they were burned in Richmond. But this I think you can just sort of read between the lines in this terse report that he writes that he is beside himself. Um,
Mm.
and he also says, I'm hampered by the fact my high command doesn't really tell me where we're going.
Huh.
So
And
is it safe to say that a lot of Confederate soldiers go maybe even 10 days without being treated because of the retreat?
I would say some of them probably just got some sloppy
Hmm.
care. You know, um, the McPherson barn. This is sort of a weird discretion but it serves as sort of an exemplar on this because people call that a hospital, the barn. It's not a hospital until July 6th, maybe. It's a place where wounded guys crawl to get out of the sun and
Right.
die and
Right.
scream.
Wow.
There's very little um, health care given to the wounded in that barn, Confederate and Union alike, because the Confederates don't have enough resources to help them, especially the Federals. They just lay in there. And there's civilian accounts. It's after the 4th. I think it's like the 5th or the 6th when those first Federal ambulances roll up to the McPherson barn. And there was a civilian, a reverend, I believe, who assisted. And he said, as soon as we got there, the place reeked. You went in, he said it was these guys had just been laying in there
Right. For
since
days.
July 1. No care.
Hmm.
And he said immediately they started doing amputations. He said within the first 15 minutes of us being there, the saws were in action. And the ambulances were trying to get these guys out of there.
Hmm.
So that shows you not only, I mean, the Confederates didn't have the ability to care for these wounded guys, much less their own, because of they've just the manpower, the lack of supplies. And I mean, you could take a deeper dive into this, the comparisons, but I think that stands out. And I don't like it when I hear people say it was a hospital. It wasn't a hospital for a number of days. It was, a death house, basically.
Okay, so Dana, those were great points and a perfect segue into what we wanted to talk about next, which was people who helped out and cared and provided assistance. Women come to town, nurses, the various sanitary aid commissions and things of that nature. You guys want to take that ball?
Yeah, sure. And I don't want to do all the talking, but I will say this, which, I've heard you say and others say to understand Gettysburg, you have to study the previous engagements. At Antietam, Letterman complains about the civilians kind of wanting to help, but getting in the way. And
Okay.
it's a problem. It's a problem. And he's like, he says something snarky like every civilian seemed determined to drag a wounded man into their house. And through that, he kind of starts looking at things and he just determines that men in houses don't do as well as men in barns, who don't do as well as guys that are in field hospitals made out of tents.
Really?
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm,
And
I
that's
I
think
think
that's surprising that would be surprising to a lot of people.
it is surprising. And it's air circulation. They were big on air circulation. So that's one of the reasons I believe they don't try to establish general hospitals in Gettysburg structures. He establishes the tent hospital, Camp Letterman, because he thinks that's the best. Because you can make it out of whole cloth, no pun intended, and structure it with wards, and it's well, you know what I mean. And here's where the surgeons meet. If you're repurposing a building, you don't always
Mhm.
have that advantage. So he doesn't do what he did at Antietam and look for big houses or structures. He uses barns for the field hospitals and gets guys out of there as quickly as he can into this general hospital
Yeah.
outside of town.
Yeah,
So
it's worth noting, because we haven't actually said it, is that germ theory is not a thing right now, during
yeah,
this war. They don't understand germ theory. There are a few people who are starting to talk about it, but of course it sounds like voodoo to them. There's these things in the air that,
yeah,
cause, disease. Then so they don't accept it. They don't work within any parameters to disinfect stuff. They use the same, you know um, saw on one patient that they go to the next patient, they're sticking their fingers in people's wounds. They just don't understand that. So I think this airflow, and that is part of it helps. They don't understand why it helps, but
Right.
it does. And at least they're
yeah,
attuned to that, and
yeah.
Letterman sees some real results from that.
Yeah. And so tying it back to um, the civilians aren't as involved because their buildings aren't being taken so much as general hospitals, although people end up in civilian houses, and I have a great anecdote about one guy that does, but the vast majority go to Letterman, right?
Hmm.
And the civilians are better organized at Gettysburg as well. And that's because big agencies like the Sanitary Commission and smaller agencies like the Patriotic Daughters of Lancaster, who were at
Mhm.
the Seminary Ridge Hospital, they serve as a magnet for, like, if the civilian's going to volunteer, they kind of go to those places.
Right.
You know what I mean? And stay out of the Army's way a little bit more. And these women that come in these agencies, men too, they perform a vital service. They're more humanitarian aid workers than nurses in some cases, but they provide food. And Letterman says, I have harder time getting food for my wounded than I do medicine.
Mm.
And because you got a medical department, and the medical department is not set up to cook. It's set up to provide medicine. These aid organizations that he doesn't resent like some others, they're set up, they provide food. And so there's this fantastic memoir by Georgiana Woolsey, who comes to work near the railroad station, which is also that there's a big condo going to go in there now, right?
Allegedly, yes. Yeah.
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 And that's
Save
where the
historic
Sanitary
Gettysburg.
Commission had a big setup. And that's where they serve thousands and thousands and thousands of meals to wounded men coming into the station from the field hospitals that are then either going by wagon out to Letterman or even further to, like, Philadelphia Satterley Hospital,
Hmm.
and transporting them. And man, oh man, did they just, she has a great description of, here's what it was in our kitchen and the stuff that they brought, and they served warm milk and whiskey, to these guys, and they would wash out bottles and fill them with water and put a cork in them and give them to these guys when they got on a train, so they had water with them. All these things that are helping survival rates, nutrition, and Woolsey gives a great account of it, and then the Patriotic Daughters of Lancaster. Woolsey's is 3 weeks at Gettysburg. The Patriotic Daughter of Lancaster, I can't remember the name of their account. They're available online. And they talk about a lot of Confederate activity at the Seminary Ridge. And Isaac Trimble,
Yeah. Yeah.
the Army, the Confederates' famous supernumerary that didn't really have any role except to, like, ride around and accompany people. He gets wounded and he complains about the food that he was served, and he sends it back. Can you believe it? He sends it back and he says it's not good enough. And the leader of the Patriotic Daughters of Lancaster says, "Yeah, send it back. That's all he's getting." So yeah, you get some really great anecdotes out of these accounts of what it was like. To
Yeah, there's a lot of women too that help out with the Sanitary Commission. Sophronia Buckland is another one, and she leaves a lot of accounts of Camp Letterman and what the day-to-day routine was like there. And again, the Sanitary Commission really fills such a huge, vital role. I mean, you can imagine if there's, no matter who you are or what
Hmm.
organization you're with, if there's a pile of, line of wounded men in front of you, you're just going to dig in and start helping out.
Hmm.
So whatever role they were there to fulfill, they were doing whatever needed to be done. So they're helping clean them, they're helping change their clothes, they feed them, you know, tend to their needs.
Melissa, a lot of times on battlefield tours, we'll say things like, "Oh, there was no FEMA back then," and things of that nature. But you've brought up the Sanitary Commission a couple of times. Maybe for people who are familiar with the name, Sanitary Commission, but maybe don't know who they are or what they do, you want to just take a minute to touch on who were they and what they did?
Yeah, sure. I mean, in June of 1861, it's actually federal legislation that creates the Sanitary Commission, and they're really they're an organization that's aimed at assisting the military medical department and providing supplies, gathering supplies, providing people. But they also have a standing committee, and that standing committee really is influential with the medical department and the politicians in trying to guide these new regulations that are coming into place and who's making them. So the Sanitary Commission actually very early in the war has a big role also in getting Hammond in place, instituting change within the military medical department that will impact, this whole organization that we've talked about. On the ground, at the battlefields, they play a huge role in bringing supplies, doling out supplies, cooking, everything really that you need. I mean, the War Department, the military is not equipped to handle these huge battles. And First Manassas really taught them that. So the Sanitary Commission is kind of like Dana says a lot, a friends group to the military medical department and helps out with what they need help with. There's also the Christian Commission as well. They're more about, physical and spiritual aid to the soldiers. But again, when they're on the ground and you've got, beds of wounded men in front of you, you're tending to their needs first. So really they're just super helpful with everything that they do. And again, like when they have supply, Letterman's always struggling with supply. All the armies are throughout the war for the medical needs, and as much as they try to improve it throughout the war, it's impossible. I mean, again, 14,000 wounded would tax our system today.
Right, right.
You can imagine it's taxing their system a lot. So he really relies on these sanitary commissions and understands that these civilian organizations there's a role for them to work together to treat these wounded men.
Excellent. Now back to nurses. Because I loiter around at the Peach Orchard a lot. I tend to talk about Anna Etheridge and the third Michigan, but thinking more again about these volunteers, these women who have heard about this great battle at Gettysburg and come here. One that I feel like we've heard more about in recent years, and it's not like she's recent news, but I feel like more people have been talking about her experience of that would be Cornelia, don't call me Winfield Hancock. Um, if our friend Phil Spoggy can get attention for his attraction to Josephine
Somebody
Rogers
try.
Miller,
Yeah.
might I say that
Well,
Cornelia Hancock is a very attractive young lady, and that
Uh-huh.
almost prevents her from helping out. You guys want to pick
yeah.
up that story?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, social change is actually also another huge innovation, revolution of the Civil War. I can't tell you how many times my family's like, "Oh God, the Civil War again. You're talking about the Civil War." But then every now and then I'm like, "Oh, that changed because of the Civil War. Oh, well, that changed because of the Civil War." So
Well, and
out of it.
it's the medical needs that bring out this social
Yeah.
revolution with, women in aid organizations and everything, and as nurses as well. Yeah. So we
Yeah,
can,
so yeah,
yeah.
nurses at the beginning of the war aren't women aren't allowed to be nurses at the beginning of
Mhm.
the war. And Dorothea Dix comes in, and starts a nursing corps. And part
And
of her,
she had a pre-war reputation for trying to help reform mentally ill care. Yeah. So.
Yes. So she'll set regulations for the nurses that are coming in. And one of them is that they should not be attractive women because she doesn't want them tempting the men or, she wants them to be very plain looking. They have to be 35 years old. So Cornelia Hancock, actually, I'll let Dana talk about her because he really likes her story a lot. But
Yeah,
Oh, I'm
Phil.
sure he does. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
yes, but she is one of Dorothea Dix's rejects, if you want to call it that. Clara Barton is as well. She doesn't fit the rules that Dorothea Dix has put out, but that doesn't stop a lot of these women who really want to help, and Cornelia is one of them. So,
Yeah, I mean, our mutual friend Carolyn Ivanoff is writing a book on
yes.
Cornelia Hancock, so she really knows a tremendous amount about her. But I one of the first memoirs I read was South After Gettysburg when I came to the
Okay.
museum, and it's Cornelia Hancock's letters and writings during the war, and it's outstanding. I would put it in one of the top five wartime primary documents, if you will, of all military everything, because she experiences so much and she serves in contraband or refugee hospitals, and just her experiences are incredible. She documents them so well, but she's like a kid, and she's a Quaker from a sort of a remote area of New Jersey. And she is a staunch abolitionist, which encourages, really leads her to, Quakers are anti-war, but she will basically go ahead and serve even because of that, because she wants to help, and she's a strong abolitionist. She literally sneaks away. Actually, after she hears of Gettysburg, she gets in a wagon driven by a relative, I think, and she's laying in the bottom of it because she doesn't want anyone in the Quaker community to see her and ask where she's going. And she gets a ride from Philly to Baltimore, I believe, on a train, and that's where Dix reviews all the possible nursing candidates and rejects her, as she says, because of my youth and rosy cheeks. But
Yeah.
undoubtedly, she just simply gets back on the train. She just gets back on the train, and she ends up making her way to Gettysburg, and she knew of a regiment of the 12th New Jersey in the Second Corps, and she starts asking where that division hospital is. And she literally just walks her way out to this hospital. And I'm going to read something here. This is a young woman who has grown up in a peaceful pastoral part of New Jersey. It's still peaceful and pastoral on tidal creeks, colonial era homes. It's quiet. You hear the wind in the rushes. Her dad is sort of an unusual free thinker kind of guy who gets on a boat at the house, which is on the creek, and fishes. The tide will take him down to this tavern, and he fishes all the way down, gets out at the tavern, takes the fish in to let the tavern cook, and then he drinks and philosophizes all day. And then he takes the tide back to his house. So she's kind of in this free thinking environment, but it's very peaceful and beautiful. And this is what she sees. This is her first sight of a hospital at Gettysburg that she writes down. And she also mentions, I smelled the place long before I saw it. The first sight that met our eyes was a collection of semi-conscious but still living human forms, all of whom had been shot through the head and were considered hopeless. They were laid there to die, and I hoped that they were indeed too near death to have consciousness. Yet many a groan came from them, and their limbs tossed and twitched. The few surgeons who had been left in charge of the battlefield after the Union Army had started in pursuit of Lee had begun the paralyzing task of sorting the dead from the dying and the dying from those whose lives might be saved. Hence, the groups of prostrate, bleeding men laid together according to their wounds. That's what she sees when she arrives at the hospital.
Hmm.
That's her first, that's the first, sensory intrusion on her. And to think that this young woman or young person wouldn't blanch and turn around and get out of there and never go back. but she goes and nurses there and stays as a nurse throughout the whole war. It's incredible what
Yeah.
these women do.
Now,
That's I was just going to say that's part of the story that always impressed me. She stays throughout the
Yeah.
war, as you said. Jody, I'm sorry.
oh, it's okay. We all were so moved by Dana's quotes there of Hancock. Now, so she was not trained before she arrived in Gettysburg, correct?
No, she wasn't trained. These nurses are often, they're not nurses necessarily. Some of them aren't like we think of, giving
Right.
medicine, right, advising doctors. They're changing bandages. This is all very helpful stuff. And they're also providing food and sometimes just comfort talking to these guys, you
Yeah.
know, and,
I
and
have because I have several accounts of the Confederate sympathizing women who come up from Maryland and Baltimore and that area. And I know one is Effie Goldsboro, and
Hmm.
she's not really a nurse and comes up and kind of does the same thing. And just from hearing you talk about, Cornelia Hancock and everything else you've talked about, does that cause issues when you have these Confederate sympathizers kind of mixing in with Letterman's plan? Or is
they,
it helpful?
well, I mean, there's some of that. I think you probably know more about this than I do, frankly. I know in some cases, these women that come up would not help Union soldiers.
Correct.
Okay. And so that was an issue. Letterman's philosophy was a wounded enemy is no longer an enemy.
Mhm.
And going back to Georgiana Woolsey in her account, she gives a very lengthy account of a dying Confederate officer
Mm.
that she spends a lot of time on. And a comrade of his comes in and identifies this guy who I don't think ever spoke. He just wasted away and died. And so I'm not sure I'm answering your question, but I know that when Woolsey's account is published by the Sanitary Commission during the war and widely distributed because it's like, this is what we do, right? And one of the points that's not necessarily blown out in that, but it's certainly there, is that we are helping both sides. And
Mhm.
that this is an American tragedy because she said something like, this guy didn't look any different from a guy I'd see in Philadelphia. You know what I mean? She makes this connection. And so, yes, I do believe some of that ultra sympathy was causing issues. I need to do more digging myself, and you seem to know quite a bit about it. But
Well, and I wonder to your point, like before this, before they started really distributing these anecdotes and stories, maybe there was a thought that, oh wow, they're not tending to our
right.
injured. Maybe
That's
we
fair.
have to go. And
Yeah.
maybe that's part of the issue.
Well, this is the first engagement fought in the North. So, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm sure there's like, what's going to happen now to these guys? They're up there, are they being taken care of at all? And yeah, so, and the Confederates have left the field. So the wounded are left there, like about 8,000 Confederates are there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah. And then she mentions too, you could just cross-reference this stuff that like Hancock says, another quote, the men lay on the ground. Their clothes have been cut off them to dress their wounds. This is written on July 7th. They are half naked and have had nothing but hardtack to eat, as the sanitary commissions and Christian associations have only been able to give them that at this point. So what she's saying there is, if it wasn't for those commissions, they wouldn't have had anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, Letterman, we have trouble feeding these guys, and this is, they really get rolling by July 10. I think they're really up and rolling down there at the railroad station in some of these places.
Mm-hmm.
So she said that she had given him, she said, I gave everyone I could a glass of wine. She said, I gave every man that had a leg or arm off, this is Hancock, a gill of wine or one glass of lemonade, some bread and preserves as I had, and tobacco, as much as I am opposed to the latter, for they need it very much. They are exhausted.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I've got my own Cornelia quote that I'll just add from July 8th. She tells her sister, I feel assured I shall never feel horrified at anything that may happen to me hereafter, and probably sums it up.
Yeah.
But
You know,
as we said, she stays, which I think is a
Yeah.
cool part
if
of
you
the
haven't
story.
read her Gettysburg stuff and you're into Gettysburg, or just read,
Mm.
get a copy of South After Gettysburg and read it. You will not be disappointed. And she weighs in on the generals at times, and all through the war, she does this stuff. So yeah, it's really good. Yeah.
Now, Dana, I know we're starting to run short on time, but I know you've
Oh
got
no.
a couple anecdotes. I know you've got one that you want to share. You had mentioned it briefly earlier about a
Yeah.
certain soldier treated in a house, and you
Yeah.
want to touch on that one?
This story has just got so many twists and turns that it just is really incredible. There was a lieutenant named Charles Hunt, and he was in Captain Greenleaf Stevens' 5th Maine Battery.
Mhm.
Okay. And the 5th Maine Battery will be heavily engaged July 1 and July 2, and some extent on 3, but on July 1, they're on Seminary Ridge. Hunt, not related to the, as far as I know, not related to the Army of the Potomac artillery commander, um, had graduated from Bowdoin College in 1861. He's from Maine, and his sister Mary, believe it or not, worked in the Gettysburg Bank. And he will come down after graduation and stay with her and
Mhm.
her husband, who's named Tom, I believe.
Yeah, Thomas.
And he like explores Gettysburg, he rides around, and he leaves these recollections. His papers survive. He goes to the round tops and checks them out, because they Devil's Den's and all that. People go and look at it. He's been there. He's ridden around Gettysburg. And so he spends time, weeks in Gettysburg. And the war breaks out, and he goes back home and enlists in this artillery battery. And then fast forward to the Gettysburg campaign, and he's joking as they move into PA. Well, if we get wounded, I hope if we fight in Pennsylvania, I hope it's in Gettysburg, because I know my sister lives there and I'll get good help. So they are on July 1, the battery is positioned. It's kind of across the street from where Lee's headquarters is.
Yeah.
There's marker there for Stevens battery
Hmm.
location, a couple cannons.
Yep.
That's where they are. So Hunt is a section commander. He's in charge of 2 Napoleons. They're firing mostly at Scales Brigade of North Carolinians. They really beat them up. They caused 500 and some casualties, firing canister mostly at these North Carolinians. The smoke gets so dense, there's like a cloud of smoke that they can't see through. So Hunt dismounts, goes over a fence, and kind of peers down under the smoke cloud to see if they're having any impact on the Confederate attack. He goes back to his horse and he mounts up, and he said, I felt a sharp sting in my right thigh. And he looks down at his pistol holster, and there's a jagged hole in it because, of course, his pistol's on his right side with the reverse draw, right? The butt forward. Um, and he sees blood seeping out. He goes to the battery commander and he says, I'm hit. And the battery commander says, all right, take yourself out of here. And so he rides to his sister's house. He rides down, uh, what was it, Chambersburg Street, I guess. And he said shells are coming in, and he gets to the square, and the bank is located kind of across where the David Wills house was, I think.
Hmm.
And so his sister lived in a house adjoining the bank. And he goes in the house, there's no one in the house. And he said there was evidence of shell damage already in the house. And he goes through the passage door into the bank. And he goes in the bank and he doesn't see anybody. And then he hears someone calling to him from the vault in the rear. And he hobbles back there. And in the bank vault, there's 19 people and 2 dogs,
Wow.
including his sister and his brother-in-law. And they wait out the battle there. And after it's over, they haul him back into the house. And he is attended there throughout the rest of the battle by Dr. Charles Herner, a local physician that he had met when he was there before. So he never goes to a hospital. He's one of these that stays, but he's only by himself. It's not like it's crowded. Confederate officers break in. They threaten to take him prisoner. His sister remonstrates. They leave. And they're like, well, we're going to be here a while. We'll come back for you. And they never do. But Herner operates on this wound and he pulls out it's a the bullet it's a bullet that struck him, and he said the doctor tells him the bullet was superficial. It was just under the skin. What happened was your pistol or your revolver was struck. And revolvers have a loading lever underneath them, a ramrod that kind of hinges down. The ramrod had been snapped off and driven into his wound.
Oh.
And he said it created a long, irregular, jagged wound, and he dug that out. And Hunt says something like, this damaged pistol is now one of my prized souvenirs. I'm like, where is it? Where is it? I want it for,
Oh,
So,
It's probably in the Phil Spoggy collection.
yeah,
yeah,
so,
right? Uh-huh.
and you're never going to, that stuff's never going to see the light of day. No, no, he's not going to show anybody. So, he will manage to survive this. He doesn't get infected. They are afraid. It's sort of humorous. They haul him out of the bed because the Confederates are in a retreat, arrayed a whole bunch of artillery on, must have been Seminary Ridge. And the civilians were afraid they were going to shell the town. So they haul him into the basement, and then they were going to get a wheelbarrow to haul him out of, and he wouldn't let him put him on a wheelbarrow to take him out of town just to save his life. But he will survive. He'll be captured later in the war, but he'll survive the war. But we talked about, the end of life thing, how it stays with him. Um, in 1904, his pension file, a surgeon said the injury had left a scar 1 inch in diameter.
Mm.
There's continuous loss of tissue around the scar and much nerve loss. And his pension was increased to $10 a month. And then 5 years later, Hunt will just literally drop dead at a railroad station. And you would imagine there's probably still some infection in him from this that's causing him issues throughout the rest of his life.
Yeah.
But this strange story of this guy from Maine who had lived in Gettysburg before the battle and then gets wounded there and goes back and is hospitalized essentially in his sister's house and receives aid from a local doctor. Yeah.
And I'll add, as a retired banker, God bless the bankers.
So apparently they had sent all the bank money out of town
Yeah.
Of
before,
course.
yeah,
Yes.
earlier on, like
Oh,
mid-June,
yeah.
they were like, get the money out of here. And they sent it to York or someplace, or maybe even further afield. I'm not sure. Yeah.
Being a surgeon, being any sort of medical attendant could be deadly. How about, do we want to talk about the story of, say, oh, I don't know, William Moore, for
Oh,
example?
yeah. We were just on
No,
Cemetery Hill.
William Moore, or there's also the Chamberlain story.
Well, let's do William Moore, because I did want to touch on the fact that you could lose your life doing this. And to be honest,
Mhm.
I have a connection because William Moore is the same name as my father-in-law. But if we have time, then we'll do
Oh,
Chamberlain too, because we did add that onto our little
Okay.
agenda here. But
I,
how
I
about
will.
William Moore to start?
Okay, William Moore is the assistant surgeon of the 61st Ohio. And the 61st Ohio is engaged July 1, their 11th Corps. Yeah, right? It's
Mhm.
11th Corps. Okay.
Mhm.
And their main monument is out on the 11th Corps field, but they were withdrawn to basically West Cemetery Hill in the East and West Strait. And they don't have a monument in the cemetery, but they have two flank markers there where the regiment was located. And so this is the other aid station too. You can kind of find where it was because Moore's in charge of the aid station in that vicinity for his regiment, the frontline aid station. And July 3rd, the Pickett's charge bombardment is coming in, the overshot's coming in, and Moore is struck in the leg. Um, and he is taken back to the aid station and he sends a dispatch to Enoch. Is it Pierce, the main surgeon of the regiment? And so the primary surgeon of the 61st comes up to help Moore.
Mhm.
He's taken to a cabin, a farmstead not far from Meade's headquarters. It doesn't exist anymore. And so Moore and his head surgeon are in there and they're trapped in there by this bombardment. And the house is struck like doesn't not well a number of times. And the main surgeon of the 61st says he could see Moore fading during this period. The barrage abates. They get out of there, and they both are. He takes them back to the Spangler Farm Hospital, which the Gettysburg Foundation operates today, which is the 11th Corps Hospital. And Moore is taken there. There's no evidence they did any surgery on that leg or amputated it, but the wound atrophies, and he will die there on July 9, I believe. He dies. He dies, and he will be temporarily buried in the Spangler Farm Cemetery before his brothers-in-law come from Ohio once they found out he died. They'll exhume his body and he's taken back to, it's near, not too far from Cincinnati, the town where he's buried. Um, and he's mentioned in Letterman's report. Letterman mentions Moore that he was mortally wounded and died, and 13 surgeons in total are wounded at Gettysburg. So these guys are, they're out in front. Not to mention the guys killed and wounded in the Union Ambulance Corps I know of. But
Right.
more will die. And, you know, Letterman says the idea that these guys, again, I'm paraphrasing in his report, aren't laying it all on the line out there is not true
Right.
because I lost a good surgeon here. And he's the only surgeon killed at Gettysburg.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
and so we know there was an aid station fairly close, probably not far away from the big soldiers monument, in the cemetery. And it's in that vicinity, somewhere up in that area.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's why I wanted to get the story in to remind people that yes, this could be hazardous work. But okay.
Yeah, I just almost every engagement that occurs during the Civil War, surgeons are killed or
Yeah.
wounded.
Yeah.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Everyone.
Yeah.
Everyone.
But okay, let's do that bonus anecdote because a couple of weeks ago, somebody from your team did a nice blog that I happened to come across and I read and I mentioned it to Dana about the other Chamberlain, and it ties back to Christian Commission work and things of that nature. So
Yeah.
Joshua Chamberlain, Tom Chamberlain, the other Chamberlain.
Other
Want to
Chamberlain,
pick
yes.
that one up and we'll wrap up with the Chamberlain story?
Yeah, absolutely. It's John Calhoun Chamberlain, the famous, but that you've all heard of, not. But he is the other brother. He is a younger brother to Joshua Chamberlain. He's 10 years younger than Joshua. And he contracts tuberculosis in 1859. So he's not able to go into the war. And he sees his brothers. His brothers ask him to come to camp with him in right before Gettysburg, honestly. But on the way, he sort of decides he wants to do something to help the war effort as well. So he joins up with the Christian Commission. And again, the Christian Commission and the Sanitary Commission are really great organizations for the rest of America, to really pull in and help out with this war effort. And it's such a patriotic time at the time too. So it really is a useful organization for that as well. So he joins up with the Christian Commission, and of course he'll end up at Gettysburg and helping treat the wounded of the 20th Maine as well. While the action starts to happen, of course, his brother feels responsible for him. He pushes him to the back of the line. Chamberlain actually John Chamberlain writes a lot of accounts about his time here because it really leaves a lasting impression on him. And actually to the effect that he will come back, on his way back he's going through Virginia or to Virginia from Maryland, and he's actually comes down sick with illness, spends some time in Middletown, actually, Maryland, and then goes home, and he'll resign his position with the Christian Commission right after that because he's done as much as he can do at that point, and I think probably as much as he can handle with it. So he'll come back, he'll get married actually, and again, he was sick with tuberculosis, and that will flare up again, and he'll die at the age of 29 in
Oh, wow.
1867. Yeah. A little weird, odd end note to that is that his wife will then marry Thomas
Oh,
Chamberlain.
that's right. I forgot about that. That's right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Uh, so keeping it all in the family there, but
Yeah. Things were cozy in the
the Chamberlain
Chamberlain clan.
brothers, they must have been something. So
Oh, yes. No
Yeah.
Rollins, but
I don't know about that.
I think that was fairly common back then, but still.
I
yeah,
think so too,
probably was.
probably,
Yeah.
Make sure she's taken care of in the
Right,
wife.
absolutely. I mean, there's not a lot of roles for women to support themselves, so they
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it had to do with inheritance. They weren't allowed to control their own inheritance, so they
Mhm.
would marry a family member.
Yeah. And of course, perhaps the greatest calamity that ever happened to him, he was omitted from the movie. I can't remember if
Yeah.
there's a mention of him in the book or not. It's been a long time since I've read the book, but we all know he's not in the movie. And
Yeah,
henceforth, when you tell people
it
there were
wasn't at
three
Gettysburg.
Chamberlains here, Was Buster a brother? They
Well, if you're
don't
not
know
in the
about
movie,
John.
then
Yeah.
Yeah.
It didn't
heroes
I
happen.
don't exist.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
learned about this Chamberlain, Don Stivers, the military artist.
Mm, yeah.
Don Stivers years ago did a print called A Hard Day for Mother.
Yeah, right.
Oh.
And it was the three Chamberlain brothers riding together and something about we need to split up or something. Of course, they would have said a hard day for mother,
That's right. Yeah, that's
right?
right.
Something like that.
Out in the yard by the car. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, of course, now everyone in New England's angry at us, but
Hey, I didn't even try.
yeah. Well, they're angry at Jim and I. But yeah, so yeah, it's kind of cool
Hey,
story.
they probably don't like us anyways, so it doesn't matter. So.
I know. Yeah.
All right. Well, now as we've ended this serious, somber topic with hijinks, I'll just kind of go around the horn real quick. Dana, Melissa, Dana, and then Jody, any closing thoughts or comments?
Just in brief, I've continually surprised. I've only been here since November 23. The medical story is very still much misunderstood. Um, there were a lot of there was progress. I don't want to, I call it a big messy step forward, right? Because it's never fixed. But these guys and women work so hard to make it better in such a short amount of time. And I always like to use this paraphrase quote from John Billings, who wrote Hardtack and Coffee.
Hmm.
He's a veteran of the 10th Maine Artillery, Massachusetts Artillery. He says in his chapter on the medical department, the something like the record of this department was the most remarkable of the war because it went from zero to something. And you always get this, the butchers and everything. This is a veteran saying, you know, they really rallied to, do what they could for the soldiery. So that's just a general in conclusion.
Excellent. Melissa, any closing,
I
anything
mean,
you
I would add too, I think what's really neat about this story is how much you can know so much about the Civil War and really not touch on the medical aspect of it, but the medical aspect touches all aspects of the Civil War. And again, there's so much innovation that comes of it, and that we're still
We
benefiting
still
from.
use the three-stage system.
Yeah, there's so much of it that we're still, using today. And I just think those pieces of the story, and of course, again, I think the social and revolutionary changes that happen for women, for African Americans, these are all really big, great stories. And it's fun to be a part of trying to get those stories out there too. So I would urge everybody to come to the museum, of course. And we're actually about to, as I mentioned, go through a redesign, and we're going to be talking a lot about those stories in that redesign as well. So
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
great.
it's exciting. What we've been talking from is 2 hours, and I'm sitting here, I wrote down a ton of questions. I'm like, that we never even got to. So this is,
And there's so many things we haven't even touched on.
oh,
So,
I know.
There's always volume two that we'd be
volume
happy
two,
to bring you back for.
All
And
volume
right,
I
two.
we'll
was
come back.
I was going to add, we look forward to getting our invite to come down to speak at the museum.
Okay.
That's going to be a cold no.
Yeah, exactly.
We'd love to have you guys come down
Oh,
here.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I'm putting together, just starting the speaker series for 2026, so we'll talk.
All right. Fabulous. I can't wait.
And for once, I'll be in Maryland, so I'll feel
All
at home.
right.
Well,
Cozy.
you'll feel at home here,
Yeah.
Frederick. Yeah.
All right. Dana Shove, Melissa Wynn, the National Museum of Civil War Medicine in beautiful Frederick, Maryland. Thanks for making your first appearance on the Battle of Gettysburg podcast. Hopefully not your last, but I've enjoyed the conversation. Like Jody said, ton of stuff we could still talk about, and maybe we'll do that again. But thank you
Awesome.
both for taking the
Thank
time to
you.
join us.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks, guys, and take care. Bye-bye.
All righty.
Thanks.
Take a few minutes and visit our website at the battleofgettysburgpodcast.com to shop, buy some new merch, check in on our upcoming events, and of course, buy Civil War books from one of your favorite podcasters.